is going on, everybody? My name is Jamie Cheerio, and I'm here with the founder of Liberty Networking, Mr. Jimmy Sorrells. How we doing, Jimmy?
Hey, I'm doing great.
Awesome, and welcome to the Liberty Lounge. We're excited to welcome our special guest, Mr. Jordan Floyd. How we doing, Jordan?
Great. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, guys, the purpose of this podcast is for us to bring on members of Liberty Networking who have businesses that promote integrity and promote freedom, and get to learn, stories about their business, tips and tricks on networking, and we're super excited to have Jordan, but I forgot to give him a proper round of applause. So, all right, well, welcome in, Jordan. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You born and raised in Greenville or somewhere else?
I'm not. I'm from South Carolina, but I was born in Florence, South Carolina. Spent my first 16 years or so there, and then I've kind of made my way around the Southeast, but came back to South Carolina in 2014, so I've been in Greenville for about 10 years now.
Awesome. What do you do?
I am a physical therapist. Started my own practice about 5 years ago. So work for myself, and we've built a team of about 5 other PTs and hoping to continue to grow that.
That's incredible. How did we get there?
So I became a PT because I initially knew that I wanted to do something in healthcare and kind of made my way around the various healthcare professions, from physician, surgeon, yada, yada, yada. But what I ultimately realized is that what I enjoy is being able to walk through a journey with somebody from start to finish, not just do a 5 or 10 minute check-in with them every 3 to 6 months, but actually get to see them on their best days and their worst days. And so that's what physical therapy is taking somebody from where they are, usually not in a great place, to get them where they want to go. And that journey is not linear. It's usually ups and downs, but we get to walk that with them. And so, that's why I chose that, but ultimately arrived at starting my own practice after 4 or 5 years of working in big box healthcare, and always had the itch to do my own thing, and an opportunity presented itself. It was actually a patient's idea for me to start my practice, and so I ran with it.
That's incredible, man. Who specifically are you trying to serve? Like, do you have a niche inside of the PT world?
Yeah, good question. We actually almost have 2 different niches within one. So we have 2 arms of our business. The first arm is more of like your orthopedics and sports medicine, what people think about when they think about more of like the performance physical therapy world, right? Like somebody who has a physical goal, whether it's be able to run a 5K, lift weights again, play sports, whatever it is. And then the other part of that, we do have a pelvic health side of our business that's specifically focused on primarily women, but folks that have pelvic health related issues. Big box healthcare doesn't serve them very well, so we've got a lot of alternative options for those folks. And so within that, we serve folks from adolescent all the way up to seniors, but primarily the folks that we work the most with are people like us, people that are in their 20s to 50s, highly motivated, either business owners or entrepreneurial people who are certainly looking for an out-of-the-box option.
That's awesome, man. Well, your business is definitely 100% needed. What did you do before you got into big box healthcare?
Before I got into big box healthcare, I was an athletic trainer, so that was my major in undergrad, and I thought that what I wanted to do was be an athletic trainer for a collegiate or professional sports team. I actually did 4 years of summer training camp internships in the NFL, and I thought that's where I ultimately wanted to be. But then kind of just had that little bit of a come to Jesus moment, so to speak, of, is this what I want my life to be like forever, especially looking around the room there and seeing what family life looked like for a lot of people in that building. Most of them either didn't have a family or their first attempt at family life didn't go very well. And so for me, that was a real priority, and just realizing that I don't think that culture was going to be in alignment with my own personal values and things that I wanted to accomplish outside of work. And so then I just tried to take those skills that I acquired there and say, how can I bring those to everyday people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, going from, training athletically to, big box healthcare to now starting your own practice, like you were technically an employee. And then now, become entrepreneur. You have your own practice. Talk about maybe the employee mindset and kind of transferring into the entrepreneur mindset. What were some things that were maybe challenging for you, or some things that were surprising for you?
Yeah, so I got a crash course in that because when I decided to start my practice, I actually had a few people that I was already kind of seeing on the side with this business, in addition to still working for my employer. But when I put in my notice, I said, hey, I'm not gonna grow this side thing anymore until I'm done here. Well, sure enough, put in my notice, that last day comes, I go to work that next Monday working for myself, and I have 1 client, right? So you're starting from scratch at that point. There's no leads to follow up on, there's no nothing. It's just, here you go. You got one person, and then you got a wide open schedule to try to figure this thing out. And so that first 8 to 12 weeks or so of literally starting from the bottom, sink or swim mentality of like, you're either going to figure this out or you're not, was incredibly impactful for me. And a lot of it came down to, I'm sure some of the conversations we're going to have now, is learning the art of networking, building relationships, being willing to give value first before expecting something in return, and then just seeing how the seeds that I sowed in those first 8 to 12 weeks were able to multiply both then and then even now, reaping the dividends of that lifestyle.
Yeah, and I happen to know you did something a little different than a lot of other PTs probably. You started as a mobile, and now you have a couple physical locations. So what does that look like, is starting mobile and then transitioning and doing both in what you do now?
Yeah, good question. So I started mobile for 2 reasons. One was to try to keep my costs down, obviously, right? I didn't want to be paying thousands of dollars a month for equipment and space and all that kind of stuff. But then the other reason was just try to be a differentiator, right? Like that was probably my biggest fear going into business on my own, is that, I mean, it's called big box healthcare for a reason. They're big. And they have very airtight funnels where once a patient walks in the door, they don't get out the door, right? They have ways to continue to keep those downline referrals in-house. And so was concerned about that. And so, hey, how can I differentiate myself? But I think COVID was a real boom for us, which I know for some people it was not so much, but big box healthcare didn't manage that very well. And so we got a lot of opportunities to serve people during that time, and then just got so busy that honestly the mobile model in and of itself wasn't going to be sustainable, because the mobile model is much harder to scale, right? I can only be in one place at one time, and then my next client is X number of minutes or miles away. So we knew in order to continue to scale that we were going to have a physical presence as well.
100%. Yeah. In my business, I'm in the insurance world, and I spent years going from home to home, sitting across the kitchen table and helping people with their insurance. And you mentioned the idea of, well, how far away is the next client? I would have days where I couldn't do more than 7 appointments in a day, period, because my next appointment was an hour away from the next one. And now we've transitioned 100% to virtual. And now it's like every half hour, back to back to back, I can run 15, 16, 17 appointments in a day. Whereas before, if I was working my absolute hardest, the most efficient, I mapped everything perfectly, I could maybe get 7 in a day.
That's right.
So,
I think mobile, the record is like 8 in a day is the most we ever did. And that was like, if you're lucky, I mapped it out well to where you kind of geographically scheduled people based on who's the closest. But there would be days where, again, you might get 4 or 5 just because you were zigzagging.
I had someone ask me one time, they're like, how do you geographically map that to be efficient? I'm like, it's not. I'm like, let's just be honest, it's really not. I'm driving an hour this way, an hour that way, an hour this way. It's not efficient at all.
Well, and as you're growing, it's like, well, I mean, I have an opening. I'm not going to tell you no just because you're an hour away. So I'm just going to go see you. And then that multiplies over the course of the month, and you're like, holy cow, I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off.
And my philosophy was always, I'd be like 30 minutes to an hour late, and I'm like, I'm trying to help the one that I'm with. And, now that I'm late, I hope that you can appreciate the fact that I'm here and I'm going to help you now. And, people were pretty graceful, even when you were late running a crazy schedule like that. So.
But that, I would say that's the other advantage that the brick and mortar side has had for us too, is that we're not having to be like, you got 2 more minutes and then I got to go.
But you still offer mobile?
We do. Okay. It's become more like probably a 75-25 thing. About 75% of people are coming to see us at one of our 2 offices now.
So myself and my wife have both experienced the quality of service that you have, and I just know it's different. How do you maintain that? How do you offer such a high quality of service and maintain it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd say 2 things. It's culture and people. So I'll start with culture. I could go deep into the weeds of the buzzwords that we use and the processes that we follow, but I think the one that kind of undergirds all of it is I tell people, close your eyes, think about the person that you care about the most in this world. Maybe it's your mom, maybe it's one of your kids, maybe it's your spouse, and then start from a blank slate and try to create the experience that you would want that person to have. So when we close our eyes and picture what the Limitless experience needs to look like, those need to be exactly the same, right? So the thought process behind efficiency and productivity and all those things, those don't come into that conversation, because what comes into the conversation is, if I close my eyes and create an experience that I would want for my mom, my kid, my spouse, what would that look like? What level of communication would they receive? How long would they spend with their provider? What would the environment look like? All of those things, like the experience comes back to that. And so I think everybody, rather than trying to use buzzwords that people may or may not understand, everybody gets that, right? Everybody can close their eyes and go, okay, well, probably I can think of somebody in my life that's had a bad experience, and so here's how I would rather it work. and we can kind of reverse engineer it from there. But then the other thing is just people. I think what I've learned, and I'm sure this applies to you guys' profession as well, is that the hard skills can be taught, the soft skills cannot, right? So hiring people that really get the people side of the business, and I'm not saying that my therapists aren't absolute experts in what they do. They are. But their expertise first and foremost has to be in the soft skills, the people side of the business, being able to connect, build relationships, play the long game with people, not trying to squeeze as much juice out of them as possible, but being willing to just give value in this moment and then try to give as much value as we can over the lifetime of the relationship with that client. That's
good.
I think that is just such a powerful principle in any business. I mean, in my business, we're not hiring therapists, we're hiring salespeople. And, I always say, skill or will. Like, I can teach you the words to say on the phone, but like, if you don't have like a willingness, if you are just going to be, a lazy person or someone who's unmotivated, like, I can't teach you to be motivated. I can't teach you that thing, but I can teach you the things to say. I can teach you, what to do and how to write an insurance application. But, that motivation and, how you deal with people and how you deal with, hardship, that stuff really, it can't be taught. So I think that's powerful, and that can really go into any business. Is there anything else that, you kind of experienced on the journey? Some people, they struggled during COVID, you thrived during COVID. What was like a big challenge where maybe you either hit a ceiling, where it was some piece of knowledge that you didn't have that you knew you needed to go out there and grab? What was something that kind of held you back, and it was a hill that you felt like you really had to overcome?
That's good. I honestly think that and I've already kind of alluded to this, I think one of the biggest challenges I had to overcome was just this whole idea of competition, understanding who my competition is or is not, and essentially stopping focusing on what my quote-unquote competition is doing, and really focus on just creating an experience that's unique to us, that we can own and we can be proud of, and not be worried about what somebody else is posting on social media or what their price or their charge is or what services they offer that we don't offer. I think sometimes those can ultimately just be distractions that get you stuck in the mud. And so, like I said, I've learned, are there other people that are doing really cool things out there? For sure. But I think in those first couple of years, as you're trying to grow something that becomes big and it's something that you can really be proud of, sometimes, and I can just speak for myself and say, sometimes you get a little obsessed going, but I'm still not as good as so-and-so, or I still don't have as many followers as so-and-so, or I still don't do as much business as so-and-so, or I don't have a space as nice as so-and-so. And in reality, all that does is distract you and hold you back.
Everybody needs to rewind and listen to that again. There's a lot of wisdom in that. That's good. Talk about about the value of having mentors in business and mentors in industry specific.
Good question. Yeah, I've probably had, like, business-wise, I've had 4 or 5 coaches or mentors over these almost 5 years that I've been in business. And I think all of them have served very helpful and unique roles at different phases of the life cycle of my business, right? There's some people that I think are extremely helpful when you're in that just kind of new startup phase, and there's other folks that can just kind of help you scale and grow, and there's other folks that can kind of help you when you hit that plateau like you're talking about before. What do you do to just kind of re-examine and get yourself out of the rut? So that's been extremely valuable. I think more than anything it is that when you're in it all the time, it's extremely hard for you to be able to zoom out and take an unbiased perspective as far as what's going on.
Oh, right.
And the other thing is you're just so attached to it. You care so much that there's emotion tied to it, right? Of like, well, I want to do it this way because that was my idea. When in reality, maybe that's not the best way to do it. And so, I guess that's how I'd answer your question, is that they've been extremely helpful in a number of ways.
Good.
Awesome. Transition in a little bit. We're going to get here into some of the more practical networking things here in a second, but we sometimes like to, discuss the more spicy topics in here. So you talked about big box healthcare. What's your rub with big box healthcare? What are some things that maybe you don't agree with?
Yeah. So you might have to cut me off here. I could go for a while.
We won't censor you. We might cut you off.
Yeah, that's okay if you have to. There's a lot of things that are broken about it, but I think ultimately the part that's broken about it is that any business model is what we call a payer-driven model, right? In other words, whoever's paying drives the decision-making, right? Yep. Okay. Well, the way American healthcare works is there is almost always a third party that it's involved in the payment process for the healthcare, whether it is the federal government, state government subsidizing it, or whether it is private insurance carriers, right? But regardless of that process, it really complicates the delivery of care when the person who is paying is not the person that is receiving said service or product, right? So ultimately, there is a detached third party that has a voice in every decision that is made for you and me as far as what goes in our bodies, what we can and cannot do for ourselves, what providers can or cannot get reimbursed for. And so what that does is that just creates a system with a ton of strain. I think the best example for people that live here locally in the upstate, recently in the headlines, a lot of folks are upset because Prisma and United Healthcare, which is one of the biggest healthcare private insurers in the country, have split, right? Prisma, the biggest big box healthcare provider in the upstate, has said we will no longer work with United Healthcare as a private insurance carrier. Why is that? And who's at fault? Well, why is that over the course of 8, 10, 12 years, United Healthcare has progressively cut reimbursement to providers while also progressively increasing premiums for consumers, right? So who is benefiting in that scenario? The patient is not benefiting, and the provider is also not benefiting. The shareholders of United Healthcare are the people that are benefiting in that scenario, right? And at some point, it was going to come to an impasse, and Prisma won't be the only one that does something like this, where essentially they say, hey, our costs have gone exponentially up, particularly over the last 3 or 4 years. The cost to do healthcare has gone up because of supply chain demands, cost of labor and goods, all those kind of things, right? And meanwhile, you're telling me you're going to pay me 4% less again this year for the same service I did last year. At some point, you just have to say, that's it. Right. And unfortunately, what happens is a lot of innocent people get caught up in that, to where now an innocent person that lives paycheck to paycheck and relies on their insurance to be able to pay for their health care, they can no longer see the doctor that they've seen for years and years. They now have to essentially start over with a lot of things that may have been chronically managed for a long time. And it all comes down to the fact that this system is a third-party payer-driven system where either federally or state subsidized healthcare or private insurance is really, they have the biggest seat at the table of anybody. And that is a system that we've created with the thought of it creates a safety net for us so that we won't go into crazy medical debt. But the downside to that is it doesn't care for people very well who are well, and it doesn't provide a long-term runway for healthcare. It might be able to solve a short-term problem of, hey, you got hit by a bus and you got to go to the hospital and get your leg fixed. But what does that look like over the long term? Usually not a great long-term solution. And I guess the last piece I'll say is that it takes the choice out of the consumer's hands, right? Because now a consumer is having to make a choice based on what is going to be covered or what they can afford rather than what is going to be best for them ultimately, which is unfortunate, and one of the reasons why I tried to start my own business to be an alternative to that.
And so with your own business, you opt out of that third party because it hinders the care that the patient actually receives.
That's right, and I'll clarify that too. In a way, we opt out of the third party, but what we really do is we put the patient in the position that the third party is in right now. And what I mean by that is the patient gets to decide first what they want and what they want to commit to before the insurance company gets a say, right? We get to make an expert recommendation. They get to decide what they want to do, and then we do help them capitalize on the benefits that they have through insurance on the back end. Gotcha. But what we're not going to do is come up with a plan, go to insurance company and say, is this okay with you? And then when they say, well, we'll do that, but 50% less, then go back to the patient and say, well, we wanted to do this, but they're only going to pay for 50% of that. Are you okay? Instead, we say, hey, what's best for you is best for you. And this is what we think is best for you. Is that what you want? And if that's what they want, great. Here's what this is going to cost, and here's how we can help you take advantage of whatever benefits you have.
Do you guys do a lot of cash pay clients?
Yeah. I mean, we do have, I would say, all of our clients in a way are cash pay, but almost all of our clients have health insurance coverage.
Sure.
They're just taking advantage of it in a different way to be able to get recouped on the back end versus I pay a $20 copay and then I wait to get a bill 3 or 4 months later after my insurance company has processed a claim. That's the other advantage, is that there's complete transparency about what it's going to cost. You're not going to pay a copay and then just go, well, cross my fingers, hope insurance covers this kind of thing. You know exactly what your out-of-pocket cost is, so you can make an informed and empowered decision that way.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that most of the more like natural practices, or they're all cash pay. I mean, whether it's a chiropractor or my wife's and kids' naturopathic doctor, like it's all cash pay for the most part.
Well, and there's a reason for that too, and that is that health insurance is designed to pay for what they deem to be medically necessary. And oftentimes alternative healthcare, naturopathic medicine, things like that, they view that as a luxury. They don't view that as something that's medically necessary, so they'll say you're on your own for that.
Chiropractic, herbs, homeopathy, all these different things, that's a luxury.
Well,
in their mind.
You can't even get insurance to cover braces. I mean, you know,
Right.
on the
Because that's cosmetic
dental
to them.
side. Yeah.
Right.
That's crazy.
Wild. All right, tell us something interesting or surprising that maybe nobody listening to this would know about you.
So I was pretty nerdy as a kid. I actually was a spelling bee kid to the point where I won the South Carolina State Spelling Bee 5 times in a row.
No way. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And
5 times.
yeah, 5 times in a row. So I won it 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then I went to the National Spelling Bee in 7th grade, did the whole thing on ESPN.
Wow.
Okay, so now I need to know, what is the hardest word you know how to spell?
Oh, that's a good one.
Well, the hardest word that I know how to spell might not feel hard to me. You can go with like the onomatopoeia or the words like that, but I don't know. And people ask me too, they say, oh, you went to the National Spelling Bee. What word did you miss to get eliminated? It's actually not an easy answer because they actually have a first round where everyone spells a word, and that ends up cutting out about half right there. Then they have a second round where you take a written test. They curve the test to make a certain number of participants just be left for the finale part that you actually see on ESPN. So you start with like 300, and by the end of that first day, you're down to like 50. And so I finished in 72nd based on my score on the written test. So I was like 1 or 2 words off of actually making it into the finals.
I had no idea there was a written test for the spelling bee.
Yep. So
Interesting.
Yeah, I feel like there's like 3 or 4 movies about spelling bees. They never talk about the written
Right.
tests.
yeah, well, again, it's behind the scenes, but that's how they want everybody to get a chance. So about 300 kids show up, and then by the time it gets to ESPN or whatever,
Nice.
they can't put 12 hours of content on the screen, right? They got to cut it down to 2 or 3 hours. They got to cut it down to about 50 spellers, and then that's what you get to see.
Wow.
So
100%. All right, so let's transition. So you talked about how you started your practice, you had 1 client, and obviously I'm sure there was many ways that you found clients, but you talked about how you realized the power of networking. Were you part of other networking groups before you got into Liberty Networking?
I was, and I was actually in another networking group with Jimmy. That's actually how I met Jimmy, was through another networking group, and have been a part of several, continue to be a part of several. It's been extremely valuable for me. I think one of the biggest reasons why is because sometimes when it's just a one-off or you're just putting a piece of social media content out there, you feel like you have to try to like cram your message into a quick 15 or 30 second snippet, whereas in a networking group, you have a bit of a captive audience to where you get to slowly build your message with people over time, slowly have opportunities to build value and build trust in the community. And then, yeah, you're just kind of growing your web at the same time to where this person may or may not ever need my services or understand what I do, but 3 or 4 years from now they might. And so I'm willing to put the time in now so that those seeds can be sown over the course of months and years. And so I think this will come up later, but I think that's one of the biggest things that networking groups has taught me is patience and playing the long game, right? Rather than just showing up and expecting, well, I'm a part of this group now, so I guess my schedule is going to be full in a month of all the people in this room.
If you knew how many times I've heard that.
Right? Where instead it's just like, hey, some of the people in this room probably aren't compatible referral partners for me, and that is okay.
Yep.
But I don't know that until I go through this process. But then the people that are like, hey, it takes time to be able to build trust because some of our industries are kind of crowded too, right? Like everybody knows a financial advisor. Or
How many realtors do you know?
yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. So how long does it take to build trust to where it's like, I know that person versus I want to do business with that person, or I want my friends, family, people I care about, my clients do business with that
But
person.
even when you're building those relationships, the people in your chapter who aren't a compatible referral partner, it's still about building that relationship because who do they know?
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the idea of you can't be narrow-minded and think that the people that I'm marketing my business to are the people in this room, right?
Yes.
You're ultimately trying to open the eyes and ears of the people in that room so that when they see or when they hear opportunities for you out in the community, that you are the person they think of, and then they're able to give value to that person by connecting that person to a solution to your problem, which happens to be you.
So I've known you for 3 or 4 years now, and I've seen how your business grows. And so through you earning the promotion that people give you through building relationships, talk about that. Like not just tagging on Facebook or whenever they're out and they keeping you top of mind, but it's because you put in that work and effort to earn that.
That's right. Yep. And that comes from giving first, right? Like I think that's just the natural, as Rick Burris would say, like the law of reciprocity, right?
Yep,
you got to give first, but then there's that natural, like I don't want you to feel like you owe me one, but there is still that subconscious, like, hey, he really helped me when I was in a bind, or hey, he gave me a really valuable lead. I want to do whatever I can to repay that. And sometimes it's simply just, hey, here's an opportunity to throw a tag his way online, or hey, here's an opportunity to make an introduction with somebody that maybe they're not a client that he needs, but maybe it's somebody that sees similar clients to him, and now I can make that connection for him, right? So all of those things have been super valuable.
Yeah,